What I believe is that everyone has things that energize them. Everyone has different talents they can bring to this cause. So we have lawyers who volunteer their time to help people like me to sit on the street and know that I've got a free lawyer to support me. We have people who used to work in investment banking who are then quitting that and then managing our finances. And you need people from all walks of life, also people who have different educations, who can build protest signs and paint them and build boats and make all that stuff look really nice, not even necessarily be out there on the streets. So I think everyone needs to reflect on, okay, if this is the issue of our time, this is the issue of our species this century, how can I contribute with my talents, with my privilege or lack of privilege, with the things that energize me?
Welcome to the VIRIVERSE, Immersive Sustainability by VIRIVERSE. We are a storytelling and mentorship platform designed to support and inspire the sustainability champions of the world. This supergroup of changemakers wields circularity, art, and science to write a formula for the very best of humanity. And together, we make saving the world fun.
Good morning, everybody from beautiful Montana, USA. And I am currently on Flathead Lake, standing on Salish and Kootenai land. And I am so thrilled to be joined by my wonderful co-host. I am Chance, aka the designer, and we have, of course, the lovely
Aurora, the change maker.
All right, this is the new norm, having Aurora with us in these conversations. So very, very excited. And of course, we are thrilled to be joined by Tom Marshall, aka the visionary Lemur, here in the VIRIVERSE. Tom believes that work should help you thrive as a human being while making the world a better place. Based on this belief, he works as a career coach and a speaker, supporting changemakers to grow their impact and thrive in life. He's also a climate activist for Extinction Rebellion. And I think we actually have some activists in the audience, so welcome. Giving talks about our climate and ecological crisis and training up other rebels to engage in civil disobedience safely and effectively. He previously worked as a strategy and innovation consultant at Deloitte while setting up a nonprofit called Extraordinary Life that makes personal development accessible for students. In 2018, he received the Rotterdam School of Management Distinguished Alumnus Award for his impact, where he completed his Master of Science in Innovation Management. The professionals who he coaches know him as a determined optimist who genuinely cares about people and has a vision for a better society, the visionary Lemur. As a speaker at 150 plus events, his audiences and venues have ranged from young professionals at multinationals to local communities in Uganda and 5,000 students in the stadium that hosted this year's Eurovision. He lives together in Rotterdam, Netherlands, with his life partner and spends his time striving to experience the intensity of human existence. Just that alone, I love that. Whether that's doing a 3-day fast, exploring polyamory, moshing to his favorite bands, dig that too, scuba diving with sharks, and experimenting with psychedelics, or attending Spanish Burning Man. Those two things go hand in hand well, I think. So Tom, super, super thrilled to have you here with us today. I'm gonna do a few kind of housekeeping notes, and then we're gonna dive right into the conversation. So this won't be your typical virtual event. We have nature sounds, videos. We're even gonna do a comic reading today. And we're also going to have a virtual campfire conversation here at some point as well, all sitting around a real fire. The flow of conversation and its parts. So the first part of this conversation is going to be kind of a deep dive with myself, Aurora, and Tom. And then, and that kind of goes for about the first hour. And then the second part of the conversation, hour number 2, is where we bring everybody up to join Tom Marshall's Fire Starters, which we'll get into a little bit later. And we'll have a group conversation about meaningful life, purpose, maybe activism a little bit, and all these different things that we'll weave in. Please keep an eye on the chat. Feel free to use it. You'll see the researcher, Carla here, opting questions and kind of weaving in different things. Links will come in there. Feel free to share any insights, questions that you may have, and we will weave them into the conversation. If there are any words or terms that you don't understand, please make sure to ask the researcher directly in the chat and she'll guide you. We want everybody to be able to participate in the conversation as equals. This is also a podcast recorded experience. So if you do speak, know that you're consenting to kind of being on camera or on audio. And please announce yourself as you speak. You know, hi, I'm Chance, or this is Chance, and then you talk and you go into your speech. This helps the hearing impaired and the visual impairments access this thing and have a similar experience to the rest of us. As far as etiquette goes, we encourage people to share without correcting stories or views, but we do want to have an authentic conversation. So share genuinely and know that this is a safe space. Use the emoji reactions if you want to come on stage as well. You can raise your hand. Those are found on the bottom toolbar and helps us have a more interactive and nicely flowed conversation. And again, when you share, please introduce yourself and feel free to introduce yourself with any diversity elements that you'd like. Want everybody to feel comfortable being them. All right, Aurora, would you like to take us into Tom's origin story?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. For those of you who don't know me, I am Dr. Aurora Dawn Benton. I've known Chance for, about going on almost 5 years. And I'm so honored and excited to be part of this experience, the VIRIVERSE. Thank you for allowing me to be part of the orbit or whatever it is that I'm doing floating out in your space. So very excited to finally meet the Lemur. I've been seeing this alter ego for a while. Like, who's this Lemur? A Lemur? I can't wait to hear this story. So Tom, it's my pleasure to kick off a little bit of a get to know you chat and especially dive into your alter ego. So let's start with kind of like, how did you get to where you are? What's that trajectory that took you from wherever you started to where we find you today?
Wow, big question. So my life story in a nutshell, basically. So I'm originally from the UK, hence my British accent, born in Birmingham, grew up in Worcestershire, in like a pretty white middle class background, a lot of privilege. And then I was protesting against the university's decision in the UK, the government's decision, I should say, to triple university tuition fees from £3,000 per year to £9,000 per year, which in the US, you're like, 9,000 is nothing, but UK wise. And that led me to actually leave the UK for the Netherlands to study economics, which studied there for a few years, kind of following the traditional corporate routes, graduated from business school and then started at Deloitte. And back then I was just starting there as a strategy and innovation consultant. And I felt like I kind of ticked all the conventional boxes of success, with a good degree, well-paying job, wonderful girlfriend, nice apartment, that I just ticked all these boxes. And I was asked to give a speech at my graduation ceremony. And I'm standing there in front of 700 people, parents, proud graduates. And I told them what it meant to be a graduate of business school or university in general. And I told them what it meant was that you had the freedom to do the things in your life that give you meaning. The freedom to do the things in your life that give you meaning. And having said that, I realized I was an absolute hypocrite because I was not doing the things in my life that gave me meaning. But neither were any of my fellow graduates, my colleagues, friends, managers. Epiphany, as you write in the chat, yeah. And that's what led me to want to change that. That was the problem that I saw, that education had not prepared people to live meaningful lives. It had simply prepared people to contribute to a system that was only interested in economic growth and full employment. Not about pursuing purpose, not about pursuing passion, not about pursuing a meaningful, balanced life, because that's not what the system is set up to do. So I started giving workshops at university, just free of charge, voluntary, for students who would show up, and I was really excited. I made some PowerPoint slides from the different personal development books that I'd read, books a room, promoted it to everyone, told my friends, and 3 people showed up. And it sucked, super mediocre. But over time, I grew, I learned, I did this more and more people showed up. It started being from me saying, can I give a workshop for you, to Tom, can you come and give us a workshop? The MBA program, the Rostam School of Management, heard about it, invited me to speak there. And I was like, wow, you're actually going to pay me good money to do something that I love? That's amazing. Then my manager at Deloitte heard about it and started referring me to some of these senior partners in organization. And they were like twice my age, which was kind of weird to coach people about life when they have twice your experience. But through that, I kind of broke through and realized that actually biological age and emotional age or reflection age are not necessarily very well correlated. That helped me gain more confidence about what I'd learned on my journey and reflected on. And basically, having done that on the side for a few years and making it a nonprofit association for students, for other students, I then quit my job at Deloitte at the end of 2019 to do it full time. And yeah, I'm just very privileged to have found my passion and purpose at a very young age, really. And at the end of 2019, I then started thinking much more about change making and really niching into helping people who are change makers, who want to make the world better, helping them to thrive in their life and their work, because those are the people that I really wanted to support on their journeys. And particularly in this, at the end of 2019, I went to my first talk of Extinction Rebellion here in the Netherlands, which is a environmental movement that uses civil disobedience to create change. And to cut the long story short, I had a big realization there. It was like being Neo in the Matrix, taking the red pill, realizing how bad things are with the climate, and becoming an environmental activist with Extinction Rebellion at the end of 2019, and wanting to find this harmony between my activism for the climate, but also my coaching and speaking and moderation work, and thus sort of focusing on change makers. So that is, in a nutshell, how I've got where I am.
I love it. And here's what I love about your story. There are so many ways that you and I are completely polar opposites, but we're in the same space with the same heart, beating for the same reasons and trying to move the needle forward. Slightly different audiences, slightly different methodologies. One of the things that resonated about your story is I came into my journey sort of a flipped side of what you're saying. You're saying, like, in business, we've sort of left out the whole purpose thing. And what drew me into this space is actually when I was in a church environment. So, usually people use faith as sort of like, how do I create purpose for my life? So I was in this church environment trying to figure out how the purpose is. And it was all about, going and volunteering at orphanages and working with children. It's like, I don't want to work with children. I'm really good at business. Can't I serve in some way with my business acumen? And that's what started my journey into this space of purpose and business can coexist. They should coexist. They must coexist. So I think that we will have a few other crossings of our paths. I probably am almost old enough to be your mom, I'm guessing, here's because you're younger, different generations, but it's so beautiful how we're all coming together with these sort of similar desires to elevate people and help them along their path. So I think this is going to be a great conversation.
Thank you, Aurora. I mean, what connects people is not what they've done or how old they are or things you can read on their CV. What connects people is their values, and you can be from any background, have shared values, and because often values are human, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's exactly right. And it's one of the reasons why I'm able to live in a part of the country that I'm surrounded by predominantly people who are on the opposite political spectrum as I, but yet, I'm still able to make some friends and hang out with my family without us hating each other. So, because we have things in common, there are things we both care about, and chances I'm living it right now. I just moved to Montana.
Yeah, really. I did just move back home, but it's exciting. I was away for 8 years, so it's good. It's good to be back. Yeah. I am in Redneckville, USA right now, Flathead County, one of the most conservative places in the world. And I'm actually glad to be here because I'm excited to really bring sustainability to this world too, because it can fit. So yeah,
yep,
it's good.
Absolutely. I did a restaurant sustainability training session last night with a local tavern that opened up here a couple months ago, and I happened to meet the owner, and like I'm excited, like, wow, there's really interest here. And clearly we're going to disagree about certain things, but it was an exciting start. So
before we go to
go
the
ahead.
alter ego, I was going to say,
Yeah, I was
Aurora,
going to say, I want to dive into that, but go ahead.
I know, yeah. Well, on this note, though, Tom, we're skipping ahead in the conversation a little bit. We don't have to go down the climate activism route necessarily just yet. However, this kind of idea of trying to reach people that aren't with us, right? They don't share the same values necessarily, but you're kind of trying to offer some sort of disruption to kind of kick their thinking into a new gear. I'd just be really curious, because you've sat in the street and actually gotten yourself arrested, right? So I'd be curious what your philosophy is around trying to engage people that don't think about sustainability or change making and climate change and zero waste and equity and all these things, right? How do you do it? What is a tip maybe that you would recommend to somebody trying to reach someone that doesn't share their values?
You make it relevant for them. You tap into values that they have, and you need to understand their values, listen to them. So yeah, you need to make it relevant for them. And so if they care about safety and stability, for instance, which is a classic value of the right side of the political spectrum, is you want stability, you want safety, and therefore we vote for maybe more sense of security and maybe heavier authoritarian leaders. So why is the climate crisis a threat to your safety? Well, you live in Rotterdam, which is actually below sea level here in the Netherlands. So if the sea level rises, you're going to be flooded. So let's talk about that. Have you thought about that? Yeah.
Awesome. We have a sustainability beacon here in the VIRIVERSE that is, there's nobody you can't reach with sustainability, but you have to sometimes meet them where they are, right? Figure out what they're into. Yeah, nice. Well, we might have to add you as a co-author to that beacon, so stay tuned, because you just threw it out without a prompt from me. So, all right, Aurora, over to you. Let's build an alter ego.
Yeah, let's walk through the alter ego. So I would love to start, just because my curiosity is killing me here. Can we start with the lemur and work our way out from there? I would just love to hear how you connect with the lemur.
Sure. So my alter ego is a little bit different to the others, because I kind of already had one 3 years ago, before Viridescent existed and before I met you wonderful humans. So I give this workshop called Unleash Your Inner Beast. And during that, we have people reflect on their passions and their purpose. And then after that, they come up with an animal which embodies them and an adjective before that. And so my team came up with the visionary lemur for me, because they say that as a lemur, you're very energetic, you kind of jump around a lot of enthusiasm. And I would never dare call myself a visionary, but they say I have a vision for the world and for the organization that I was leading, and how I want things to be better. So that was kind of how they combined those two together and gave me the tagline, the visionary lemur. And I took that to Chance, and Chance was like, well, I actually quite like that. We don't need to change that.
Sometimes I think it's actually easier and almost more just maybe beautiful when someone else gives you the word, right? Or the element of it, because sometimes it can feel a little bit awkward to own and name a part of yourself, right? I think that's part of this journey of helping the people that we want to help, is helping them own the part of themselves that maybe they're not willing to acknowledge or feel confident in. And so sometimes it can be so helpful when other people, even those of us who are on the stage, leading the charge, inspiring people and teaching people, even we have our moments of like, really? Is that me? I don't know. And so I think it's a really lovely humility on your part to own a word that your team gave you. I think that's actually really a lovely gift to them, right? Because you're acknowledging and accepting the way they see you, even if you're maybe a little bit like, really? That's me? Okay. So I think that's actually a really cool part of the story, in my opinion.
Yeah, thank you.
So
definitely, it's important to own your compliments that are given to you. And indeed, just because you're out on stage doesn't mean that you actually are self-confident. Often those are the insecure overachievers who don't have the self-confidence. So yeah, definitely good to own the compliments that are given to you, and it helps if someone else can give those to you and give you that labeling in a positive sense.
Absolutely. Now, I'm guessing that your favorite nature element is fire. Or
how did you guess? I mean, there's only like 6 different fire emojis on that thing, right?
So what's the deal with fire? And if I understand correctly, we're going to explore that even further in the second half. So I'm excited about that, because I also love fire. I have a little bit of, I'm not an arsonist, but I am definitely a lover of the flame. So tell us about that.
I just find it's a beautiful element. I mean, it's so free and unpredictable, and it's ever changing. And the only constant in life is change. And I think I can sit at a campfire and stare at a fire for a long time with friends, with loved ones. And there's something about fire and this primality when you sit around the fire that brings people together around this beacon, literally a beacon, and this flame and fire also within you as well, and the imagery that creates of having a fire within your heart and sort of drive and an energy. And I think that's what I have in my life.
I love it. That's so beautiful. You're right. It is one of those, I think all of us, we see our nature element as sort of firing on multiple cylinders, right? Like there are a lot of multiple meetings. I don't know if you're aware of mine, but I'll do a quick, I know it's going to be small, but if you see on my image, there's a tree with a little, this is a photo that Chance rendered into my alter ego. And so you see a little sunlight, you see the tree, and the element is Cytherium, which is the sound, it's the wind blowing in leaves. And for me, it's really the wind represents change, because it's something you can't see and you're really striving for until all of a sudden, like you see the results of it. And wind can also have an impact on flame, right? You can be just watching a flame and all of a sudden it just like moves in a different way, and it's not anything you did. You blew on it, right? But it's just the wind came out of nowhere and you don't necessarily see that or know it's coming. So it's the same with, like, I used to go sailing a lot, and so you'd just be in calm waters and you'd see out ahead like, oh, the water's changing, the wind is coming. So I think it's also similar in that it's this unpredictable thing, it's uncontrollable. And I think that's one of the great things about these alter ego components, including a nature element, because it reminds us that it brings so much beauty in life, but it's also something we have little control over. We can destroy it, but we have little control over what makes it so beautiful and so powerful. So I think the flame articulates that very nicely.
Yes, definitely. A connection with nature and nature elements help you transcend your ego and see that you are a little small piece of life in this massive web, which is much more powerful than you and more important than you.
So I don't know if the audience is picking up on this, but there is a little bit of a web weaving between the change maker and the visionary lemur here. And I am just enjoying every bit of it. Aurora, carry on.
Awesome. Okay, so what is your sustainability beacon?
So I have 2. I mean, a beacon, the way that I define it is something that is a calling, possibly, that you go towards, that you live by, a philosophy of sorts. So I'm going to name 2, and these are quotes that I often use in my workshops and talks that I give. And the first one is a quote from Václav Havel, who is the former president of Czechoslovakia. And he says, "Hope is not the same thing as optimism. It is not the conviction that something will turn out well, but hope is the certainty that something makes sense, regardless of how it turns out." And I really am very inspired by that when I think about climate activism, because there's only so much I can do as an individual, and maybe the planet is already screwed, to be polite. And maybe we won't stop reaching 2 degrees, 3 degrees, 4 degrees even. But everything that we do makes sense to do it. And the fact that I'm doing it will reduce the load on my conscience when I have to explain to my grandchildren why the world is the way it is. And just because you don't know exactly how it's going to go doesn't mean that you can't do your best, because it's the right thing to do. So that's Václav Havel. Margaret Mead is an anthropologist, and she has a quote that I love, which is, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. In fact, it's the only thing that ever has." And for me, again, that's about when you come together as a community, you can be very powerful and very influential. On your own, you can be very alone, very afraid, very powerless. But when you come together, you can create something special from the synergy of your drives, of your passions. You can create something beautiful, something impactful, something meaningful. And that's what Margaret Mead is saying there. And when you look at the history of struggles, of citizens uprising, of all these different groups, it's always been people coming together and saying, we've had enough of this, we're going to change this. And they do. They set the wheel going, they set momentum, which then involves the rest of society.
Yeah. Tom, something I want to say, I guess, thank you for, and kind of reminding me of, is something when we first started this viridescent platform and this idea of building this like immersive sustainability weird world of the VIRIVERSE and all this, we had a lot of really strong ambition to it. And so we kind of started asking each other question like, what if we don't change the world, save the world, make the impact we want to make, you know, whatever. And the philosophy that I've really started to carry is that, I mean, what if we change a bunch of lives along the way? What if we all live lives that promote the beauty of nature and foster caretaking and living a life in balance and all those things? Maybe humans aren't supposed to be able to turn the course of this thing around, right? We should damn well try, but it's also, I think, important for us to understand that this whole thing is bigger than us too. Maybe it's been caused by us, certainly. It sure seems that way. The science says so, right? But at the same time, it's still a system so much larger than us. And there's a long way to go on this human ride still. We got a long way and a lot of time still to figure some parts of this out. But maybe it's not so much about fixing as it is about just continuing to be resilient and better and improve and grow and mature and evolve and all those good things. So thank you for that. I really like your philosophy around this. All right. So we're going to do a quick mindful minute because we've hit this hard and heavy real fast here. So we're going to throw up a video, a little bit of sound, some music, and just enjoy, you know, a minute or two. Everybody get up, grab a drink, do whatever you need to do, kind of recenter, and we'll kick the conversation into your life coaching on the other side. Angel's Landing in wonderful Zion Canyon National Park in my other home, Utah. It's a beautiful place and kind of a crazy hike. My brother was actually determined on that hike not to touch the chains. I've never used the chains was his thing, and he did it. I think he's kind of an idiot personally, but you know. All right. Maybe he needs some life coaching, Tom. Or maybe not. Maybe he's doing exactly what he's supposed to be doing. All right. So let's talk a little bit about your platform, right? And this kind of idea of helping people achieve a meaningful life, right? And it's funny because we actually, in our last conversation with Rose Kaz at Lady Boss International, Aurora dropped the funniest moment of the whole thing, I think, where she actually basically said, "Fuck you" to life coaches. Because, and a little context, because she is one.
I do that for real?
You did. You totally did.
Oh, no, I know what it was. It was the people who post on Facebook and say, "I launched a class and have $5,000 in sales each week." And I'm like, fuck you. It doesn't work that way.
Who are you? This is not a real
your
thing.
ad and go away because
it's okay. No, it's okay, Aurora. It's a bot. It's a bot. No, it isn't a bot. It's somebody that has found success in doing this, right? But it's tricky, right, Tom? It's not easy because getting people to invest in themselves can be really difficult, but you're good at it and you're finding some energy. And we're really excited. And for those that are participating today or listening on the recordings, we actually have a VIRIVERSE discount to Tom's life coaching. So we'll provide that in the links in the chat here, as well as our show notes. But Tom, how do you do it, right? How have you found success? What is your key? And tell us a little bit about what your coaching programming is.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, how do you find success, right? I mean, coming back to what Aurora was just saying, you know, it's about defining success on your terms for yourself, not defining success based on the system's terms of earning X amount of money, as if that is very well correlated with fulfillment and balance in life. So I got into coaching basically after, you know, a lot of the workshops that I would give, where people would come up to me afterwards and say, "Hey, Tom, can I work with you one-on-one? Can we talk about passion and purpose from that?" And that's so I started doing it a few years back, and really enjoy the connection that I can have one-on-one with someone over a period of time to really help them transform their lives. So I really focus mainly on helping change makers, as I mentioned, and that's predominantly young professionals, but it can also be more middle-aged professionals who are in a corporate environment, who really want to make the world a better place, but they're a bit disillusioned with their work. And so they want to find more meaning and purpose. And so I have a discovery call with people, which I do for free. I always do that just to really add value already in the first call and support them as I can. And we start by just looking at their life. And we do this exercise called the 12 areas of balance, looking at, okay, how balanced is your life in all these different areas of your relationships, your family, your work, your career, your growth, your contribution, your community, all these different things. And then from that, I have a well-rounded understanding of the person. I really can support them to move forward in whatever way that is. And I focus mainly on finding meaningful work. I do this program called Love Your Work, where I really support people to transition from working maybe a corporate job. They're not really very satisfied with it because there's no meaning or purpose in it, and helping them to actually navigate through this transition, just like I did, from a position of starting at Deloitte and then not really finding purpose and meaning in that. And I think really this whole journey of coaching is, I am a critical mirror with love. So I'm mirroring back and helping to facilitate the process of my coachee, and also being critical, helping them to dive deeper and challenging them with that, but also being very loving and caring in a way, helping them have empathy and compassion for themselves. And so the main programs, as I mentioned, are the Love Your Work program, but I also do a program which is called Passion Project, which is maybe people who want to do a passionate project on the side alongside of their day job and don't want to jump ship just yet or change that, and then they'd be a bit more entrepreneurial. And I also have a program called Level Up, which is really for people who want to level up a certain part of their life. So it can be anything really. and I'm this accountability partner that turns up on their doorstep and like compels action. You can't not take action. I was once compared by one of my coaches to being like a personal trainer who turns up on your doorstep, and you can't like not work out because Tom's there and he's helping you to take action, but you can't say no to move forward. So those are like the three programs that I offer, and I find so much meaning and joy in this and helping people go on this journey, because it's a journey that I've been through without really having someone to support me. Although I'd say that, but actually I've been coaching my best friend. We've been coaching each other for about 6-7 years now, and it's kind of changed each other's lives through doing that. So I've had support from other coaches on the way, I must admit.
So, well, every good coach had a good coach, kind of thing, right? Or has a good coach. So Tom, I'm actually going to hold myself accountable right now here, live on the spot. So I'll explain what this is in a minute. So Tom has actually been coaching me on helping me find some discipline and balance. I've been on this lifelong journey to find balance in my life, because it is my belief that a sustainable human is the one that is going to build a sustainable world. And one of the things that he told me is, he's like, write your morning routine on a sticky note and put that damn thing on your computer right here. And when you come in the morning and you try to get to work, because I can be prone to do that once in a while, you see that sticky note and you're like, nope, I got to do my morning routine, my yoga, my meditation, my reading, those kinds of things. And then I put it up on my screen and I put it right back there at the end of the day, and it is working really, really well. I won't give you all the credit. Being in Montana just feels good. So I'm going to take a little bit of ownership too. But and the other thing that I want to offer in my experience with Tom's coaching, but I think that this can really speak to the importance of coaching. And I'd be kind of curious your response to this a little bit, Aurora, too. But for whatever reason, there's something about like, well, I could never pay somebody to coach me, right? I don't have the money, it's not something it's like, what is more worth investing than you, right? Than you, like you got to be the best you. And there's something about a coach that offers sometimes a mentor, sometimes tough love, sometimes structure, sometimes just a little bit of encouragement. And Tom and I were actually going through some stuff on Sunday, the day I was actually moving to Montana, and I was drawing something for him on a whiteboard behind me. And I was off to a really good start. And then I stopped and I kind of was looking at it. And he said something to me. He said, trust yourself, Chance. Trust yourself. What's the first thing that comes to mind? And then I just flowed through the whole thing the rest of the way. And it's going to be one of the most meaningful things I've ever created. It's a gift for my wife, actually. And that has helped me in my life. And it feeds into the work and inspires me and all that. But a coach can be really healthy for you and really valuable and make you better at whatever it is you're trying to do. And for sustainability champions and change makers, game changer. So Tom, here live on the spot, I just want to say thank you. And I can't wait to continue to learn from you as we go. So I don't know. Yeah, thank you. Aurora, I don't know. Do you have anything to add kind of as somebody who's coached? I think maybe the question we could pose here is, like one big piece of advice that Tom would offer to life coaches, to the entrepreneurs that are building a platform. But I'd be curious kind of your perspective, Aurora, if you want to kind of guide us into that question for Tom to respond to.
Yeah, so first of all, I'm also a huge advocate of coaches. I've worked with a few at different spots in my career who were game changers and just getting me to that next level. And I've also done therapy, so it's like therapy, but there's a little bit of a difference, right? It's sort of clinically and sort of the approach to it, but still all about digging in, looking, a little bit of navel gazing, but sometimes you have to do that to really understand yourself, how you got to where you are, what you need to do next. And there are a number of ways you can do that. Working with someone one-on-one is a great way to do it. The coaching that I do tends to be not so much about like sort of personal development, but it's more about the professional's development. Like I work with entrepreneurs to help them with like pitch development and stuff like that. But my focus is very much on how they manage their teams and how they interact with their teams and delegate to their teams and become the leader that they need to become, and really building confidence in them as business owners, business people, business leaders. And more recently, the coaching is more in line with like, okay, go through my coursework and I'm going to coach you so that you have the confidence to actually implement it. And again, I think it's a different sort of tone and tenor than what Tom is doing, but there's needs for all of it, right? Like I would say to any people that I'm coaching on like this professional level, I'd say like, you also need a Tom in your life. Like you need different people. It's just like, if you have a car and that car has a problem, you may need to take it to multiple different kinds of people, right? Like you may like, oh, I want a new paint job, so I'm going to take it to this person over here. Oh, the brakes are old, I'm going to take it to this person over here. We are the same way. We are multi-dimensional people, and we may need somebody who can help us with our exercise routine, someone who can help us with a spiritual journey, someone who can help us with leadership development. And those are different people. And 1000%, I know I hate sometimes when people say that because it's ridiculous, but I'm going to be ridiculous about this. 1000%, it is worth the investment. If you have any amount of money that you can spend on that and invest in yourself, it is worth the investment to work with people that can help you. So Tom, yes, I'd love to throw this back over to you. And, one of the things that I would be curious, kind of going back to Chance's original question, I have not intentionally built a coaching business. I do training, I do consulting, I've kind of stumbled into coaching. Sometimes people come to me like, oh, I heard you're good at this, will you work with me? But I haven't actually built a coaching business. I don't have necessarily the desire or the skills to do the social media, to be the influencer. And so I'm certainly curious to hear a little bit more about that process of building the platform and the coaching business and more intentionally than probably I have.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, firstly, so I also never intended to get into coaching, right? As I mentioned, it was people coming up to me after the workshops and the speaking that I do saying, oh, Tom, can I work with you one-on-one? So I think what that shows, I think, is that coaching, what it comes down to is human connection, right? And it's about having a passion for that. And I think if you want to be a coach, that's what you've really got to love, is just digging deeper in with people and connecting with people. And I think, in the world that we live in today, there's a very big focus on social media and building awareness and needing to be on Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, Facebook, and just pushing out content all the time. But for me, one of my life principles, I have 12 life principles, which I discuss in my podcast. One of them is that real connection happens in person. And I was questioning that after the pandemic and thinking, oh, but I am having great connection. I've met Chance during the pandemic and having incredible connection virtually. So does it always happen in person? But having now getting back to doing live events again in person, I'm like, yeah, okay, real connection in person is really where it's at. So all that to say, that long preamble, is you have to enjoy that connection. And actually, social media, for me, it doesn't feel like an exciting thing to do, to be a content creator. And I recently, after sort of trying to push myself for months to be this creator who's going to share daily on LinkedIn, who's going to build up an Instagram presence, who's going to do this, realize that is not how I want to spend my time. I don't want to be a content creator. And if it means that I get less coaching clients or less work because I'm spending less time on social media, then I'm going to do that. And I'm focused now on really just delivering at a 10 for my clients, putting my effort into preparing for the events, preparing for the sessions that I do, and skilling up, so that then I will be referred through word of mouth. And that's the biggest way of marketing of coaching is word of mouth. And if you do a great job for someone, if you change someone's life, then they're going to share what you do. And that's more powerful than you pushing out content daily on social media. And as Chance mentions in the chat, working with incredible platforms like VIRIVERSE, who content is what they do and what they love, is a fantastic thing to do. And I really appreciate the elevation that VIRIVERSE is doing. And this is very meta because, of course, this is a show on your platform right now. So yeah, that would be, I think, my advice for coaching and actually building the organization and the marketing of that.
And that really, Aurora, right, it leans into a sustainability element here, is it's a localized energy kind of build a movement, right? Is, you know, if you're trying to do it in person a lot of the time, especially Tom, right? Like in the word of the mouth thing, you can do that virtually too, right? But I love that it's rooted in kind of a localized sort of vibe and development that can really maximize that feeling of being together with somebody in person. But I think that, you know, Tom, certainly our experience is that we can show that it can be done virtually as well, right? And especially in coaching, that is an opportunity for scale and all those good things too. But it's also a reason to meet people, to go to events and meet the people that you've coached virtually and all kinds of fun things, right? So there's goodness, but it's all rooted in this like localized. Yeah, Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, well, one thing I would say to caveat this real connection happens in person. It's more like real connection happens like in a live conversation with video, right? So I coach people online, but I think what you see with most content that coaches are creating is it's a loudspeaker. It's not a two-way interaction, or it's written text on a screen or an image which someone's scrolling through. It's not a interaction. It's not really a conversation. So I think I would caveat that by saying there are great ways of digitally connecting as we're doing right now.
I would love to ask a question that, Tom, I don't know if you've done any of this. I'm just doing my first experience now where I'm doing sort of a group coaching. And again, it's not about change your life. It's about, here's a course on procurement, sustainable procurement. So it's walking a group of people through, hey, have you thought about how you purchase paper? Have you thought about but it's also who are you going to talk to in your organization, et cetera. So I thought about this group coaching way to do it because I thought, well, it lowers the cost, right? It's 1 hour of my time, or 90 minutes actually for each session of my time. But if each person's paying a smaller amount, then, you know, and I find that there's some really great elements to that, right? Where people can kind of, you know, learn from each other. And I learn like, oh my God, I never even thought about that situation. But I also find that it makes it so difficult for me to really coach. It's a great discussion group, but I can't dig into each one of their situations the way I'd like to. So I'm just curious what you think about a group dynamic and group coaching. Have you done any of that? And what do you like about it? And what would you do differently?
Yeah, I mean, group coaching is in a way what you can do in workshop formats of sorts, which I've done in multiple ways. And of course, we have the community, the fire starters, which I think we're going to go into in a bit. But I think the advantage of group coaching, indeed, it's a bit more scalable than one-on-one. And I think you unite people who have shared problems, shared challenges, and just through having them each share their challenges and be vulnerable, it really legitimizes the feelings that they have and the problems that they have. And they're like, oh, wow, okay, everyone else also has these issues and this is normal. And it helps them to accept themselves and accept the situation that they're in. And to normalize that, which I think is one of the first important steps of that awareness, and then accepting where you are so that you can move forward. So I think that's one of the biggest benefits there. And often you learn from each other from that with what you share, and there's different strategies to address a shared problem, and you can learn from each other's strategies, and also pair up and take action together, having accountability partnerships, which I often do in my workshops, where people will then check in later. And so I'm facilitating other people to support each other on their journey. And that's a way of scaling your impact as a coach or facilitator.
Thank you. That's helpful. Yeah.
So Aurora, I think it's time to kind of pivot into a little bit of climate activism conversation. Before we do that, just a couple of little threads to kind of tie up here. So earlier we built Tom an alter ego character. We do offer that for anybody and everybody. That is one of our kind of ways of coaching. And what we're doing there is helping people meet and try to find the very best of themselves. And soon we'll be turning that into immersive workshops where the alter egos come together and they work on something together as a collective to learn how to map business or sustainability to a business strategy, or how to think in circular economics and innovation and things like that. So stay tuned to that. Carla's put some links in the chat and you can get access. If you want a character, there's a portal to sign up for one. as well as if you would like to participate in these workshops that we are launching in January of 2022, which is very, very soon, sign up for our email experience. And that will also get you access to Tom's discount code and all that good stuff too. So some good things. Okay, now that the silly housekeeping nonsense is out of the way, let's talk climate activism. And this will kind of start our journey towards the fire starters and a group conversation here on the second part. But let's do just a quick deep dive with you, Tom, on your approach about climate activism. And you talked a little bit about it in your origin story, but maybe tell us a little bit about what that inspires you to do, how you do it, what your philosophy is. I know that like Extinction Rebellion's kind of 10, I don't know what they call them, those 10 principles that they have. I love their mindset on this idea of civil disobedience. So tell us about that too.
Sure. So this week is COP26, right? 26. We've had 26 of these conferences where countries come together. The first one, I believe, was 1990, something like that. And global CO2 emissions are still rising. In fact, we've polluted more since the first COP than before that. And we've done that knowingly, right? So 30 years of inaction, because global CO2 is still rising, despite all the pledges you might see, despite all the supposed good news of recycling, all these kind of things, global CO2 is still rising. So basically, all COP is a symptom of a failed system. And we've tried for 30 years to have discussions, have talks we've done marches, we've done petitions, and it's failed, sadly. And I can show you one graph which shows that, with the global CO2 going up, COP conferences going like that. So what do you do? What do you do when your method has completely failed? Or you need to break the law. You can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. And that's what we've been trying to do for 30 years, using the master's tools. And this is civil disobedience. So non-violent civil disobedience, peaceful action, which disrupts the system that we live in, right? So you can imagine things like blockades, so blocking traffic, blocking entrances to offices. You can imagine all these kind of other methods which have been done by Extinction Rebellion, have been done by Greenpeace with the boats, these kind of things. But putting your body on the line, in my case, getting arrested earlier this year in the rebellion of one action, which was sitting cross-legged on a pedestrian crossing, facing oncoming traffic with a sandwich board sign on my front and back, which said, "I'm terrified to have children because of the climate crisis." So that's really where this comes from the problem. I really wish I didn't have to spend an afternoon doing these things, or a whole day or a whole week, as we did in The Hague earlier this month, because I've frankly got better things, more fun things to do, although it gives me a lot of meaning and community in my life. And knowing that this conference was in 1990, I was born in 1993. This should have been solved before I was born, or at least before I turned 18, but it wasn't. And this is the picture now, and that's a nice bit of Dutch education for the non-Dutch people here, with my sandwich board sign. And actually, I'm going to court in December on my 28th birthday about this action, with 3 other activists who did the same action on the same day in Rotterdam. This is right before the election. I have immense privilege, by the way. So I'm not risking a prison sentence, fortunately, with this. And I knew exactly what I was getting into, because I give trainings on civil disobedience. So I give trainings on how to do these things, and knowing my rights. So just to tell you a bit how that goes, my charge is ignoring a police order, which is a very low offense here. The worst thing I can get is a €250 fine and a mark on my record, which has, for me, no effect on my future career, because ignoring a police order is just not relevant unless you want to join a police department. So I have immense privilege. And when you recognize that, recognizing your privileges also as a white man in the way that I was treated by the police, for me, it's just the most effective thing to do. And this is proven by social science, and there's people who set up Extinction Rebellion a couple of years ago, who actually have PhDs in this thing, in civil disobedience. So it's very much scientifically driven as the best approach to do after 30 years of complete failure of other forms of protest and of politicking and conferences. And just to round off, I could talk for ages about this, but just to round off is with COP, in the words of this incredible artist who I can't remember his name, but in his words, the revolution will not be televised. We will not see massive change in this COP. COP will fail, but proclaim victory. So the answer, also as Greta Thunberg will say, is to take to the streets, to actually change the system. And I could talk more, and we will talk more, but I'll let you two respond to all of this stuff that I've just thrown out there.
So it's really interesting, you know, when you say take to the streets, something that's important as a framing for this is it doesn't necessarily have to be taking to the streets to sit down in the middle of the street and get arrested, right? As you've acknowledged, you have a privilege that allows you to do that in a way that feels safe and comfortable, and to even be treated politely as they're walking you into your jail cell. So maybe that's a good method for you, right? Yeah. Maybe that's a really good method for you, but if it doesn't feel like the right method for another, know that there are other ways you can take to the streets, right? You can go into your business and you can change that system. You can use that change inside your business to roll it up and change the industry that you're a part of, right? There's all these different ways that we can kind of take to the streets. But I would love, you know, Tom, for, you know, kind of like one big piece of advice for somebody that is having this call to action that I want to be a little bit of a radical revolutionary kind of thing, right? If that's in you and that's what you feel like you want to do, what is your advice? What's your biggest piece of advice to someone?
Big question, Chance.
Yes, I like that.
I like big questions. So my philosophy around real change for the climate, for our planet, is don't hate the player, hate the game. And it's not really about hating, it's more about getting people to think systemically, right? So I disagree a bit with what you said around taking to the streets by doing something within your company. Okay. Although it depends what that thing is. And so in that talk, which, you know, you can send a link to, that I do, it's a 15-minute TED style thing about the system of neoliberalism and the failure of that, is we live in a system of financial maximization. So as much as the CEO of Unilever, as amazing as Unilever is in general terms as an organization, being very sustainable, they still have to focus on selling more, which means consuming more, which means more waste. Regardless of how they minimize the amount of plastic within their products, they need you to consume to survive. And that's the system that we live in, is a system of financial maximization at the exploitation of everything else. As you've seen in the last few weeks with the whistleblower of Facebook, classic example, Frances Hogan, right, who has said that Facebook knows that its platforms are harming the mental health of young teenage girls, but because the platform relies on having as much attention as possible in order to get as much ad revenue, they will show you awful misinformation, awful content to get your attention there, regardless of the effects of society, because it's financial maximization. And that is the classic example of that. So coming back to your question, I am weaving back here, Chance. Doing a sustainability initiative in your organization can be great, but bear in mind, profit will always come before purpose in this system. And so what you can do is you can actually talk to, in the Netherlands, we have this system called Workers' Council. So it's a form of unionization, I guess, of actually coming together and putting pressure on your leadership, putting pressure to change. You as an organization, you should actually be asking governments to regulate your industry, to get that industry to change. I spoke to an employee of the large fossil fuel company Shell a couple of years ago. He was just saying, we need a carbon tax. You know, if there's not a tax and there's no regulation, Shell won't change, Total won't change, ExxonMobil, all these big companies, they're not going to change without the regulation, because if Shell would change, they would lose out to their rivals, right? So you can ask for regulation. I think you can join different movements, which actually puts pressure and actually disrupts the system. Again, you're needing government action, so putting pressure on governments, trying to cause disruption there. I mean, the system in the US is pretty screwed. Having read Obama's memoir last month, with this intertwinement of power and money, even more so than in Europe, I think, and the system of the two-party system with the Senate. And as you see right now with this, I think, senator who's a centrist Democrat stalling Biden's climate agenda, and it's a failed system. So you need to put pressure on to change that. Big answer to a big question, I guess. In short term, very briefly, find your community. So if you care about this, join movements, come together, band together with people who are like you, becoming part of shared groups like Extinction Rebellion, like Fridays for Future, like other groups. Find a community and they will support you. And alone you are feeling very powerless, but together you are strong, and it feels like an incredible community that you've got there out just waiting for you, that you can find if you seek these people out. And then you can make real change, not by playing the game, but by changing the rules of the game.
So before we kind of pivot, I was going to say, let me set the stage for you, Aurora, actually, because I'm thinking about you because I know you have thoughts here.
Yes.
So before you go, let me offer something as kind of a bridge here, I think. I think there's a sustainability lesson here for sustainability people specifically, and for business people specifically too, in that there's a lot of things required to changing the system, but ultimately it is all about changing the system. But how we play our roles and our parts, and how we are the actresses, and everyone else in this thing can be a bit dynamic as we go. And I think what it is, the responsibility of sustainably minded business professionals, entrepreneurs that are doing these things to affect change, is to help support causes like what Tom is doing in Extinction Rebellion and across a lot of other spaces, and know that that is a part that you can play at times too. And you can do it inside your system. But if you play, diplomat, if you need to play diplomat, right, in that, that's okay too. But always have that governor, I guess, or maybe it's a beacon that is disrupt. Try to bring new perspectives, fresh perspectives. Don't be afraid to speak your truth in these moments. So Aurora, I'd love to hear kind of your response, because you have a much different philosophy
I do.
about this.
So I will frame this by saying, that a lot of the people that I have coached and mentored over the years would never be even on the radar of the kind of a company like Deloitte or the graduate school that Tom probably went to. And the beauty of what you're doing, Tom, is that you're working within a space where you can reach people who have the power to change the system. I work predominantly with people who will, unless they do mass mobilize, will not have the power to change the system because of who they are, because of the color of their skin, because of where and how they were born. And my passion is to show them that even though they are stuck in a system, which they generally don't even see it that way. They don't know how to articulate and understand that, but they do feel something's incongruent. They struggle with that, but they lack the confidence and the skills and the knowledge often to do anything about it. So I try to set them up for some level of success to be able to do what they can within their span of control. Span of control is a very important concept in this. I hope that Tom is reaching people who have powerful spans of control and can do things that are monumental. I am mostly reaching people who have a limited span of control, and I want to optimize the hope and the power that they can feel within that span of control in terms of what they can do to make a change, even if it is still inside of a broken system. I totally get that. So let me just kind of give a quick little example of what most people out there feel about sustainability. On a Facebook group, I think about like women who travel or something like this. This is like maybe a year ago. Somebody posted the question, what should I do to be more sustainable in my travel? I saw somebody post the answer. I'm working on my master's degree in sustainability. Once I'm finished, I'll be able to answer this question. I was like, freaking Google it. It's like Are you kidding me? So most people out there, when I talk to them about sustainability, it is presented. Unfortunately, we have done this to ourselves because the sustainability elite, the professionals, the directors, the VPs, the people who do sustainability have been very much like, it's my territory, right? We fought so long and hard to get in these jobs that we're afraid to open our arms and share the work and share the glory and all of that. So there tends to be this feeling inside of organizations that sustainability is this thing, I don't have permission to touch that. I'm not allowed to do that. And I come along to say that's bullshit. If your job is to buy staplers, then buy this stapler instead of that stapler. Buy the one that's got recycled content. Buy the one that comes from a social enterprise or whatever, right? So it's really about, I think, both and. This is not an either or, just because I come from a very different place. This is a both and. If we don't have talented people who can change laws and sit in streets, and if you don't have people like me who are training dishwashers and front desk agents at hotels, we're not gonna, this isn't gonna happen. We have
it's
to
a bridge
squeeze from both ends.
It's a bridge between the two, right? Tom, I'd be curious kind of your response to this. Anything you want to say to kind of wrap up this piece?
Yeah, I mean,
as we protect the status quo here, break it, take that hammer and smash through it, my friend. Let's go.
I'm an evangelist, right? And my girlfriend said to me recently, said, Tom, if you'd grown up somewhere else, you would have been like an evangelist for a church somewhere. Like I'm very passionate about what I do, and sometimes my pitfall is being a bit self-righteous about my approach. And I think one thing I didn't mention clearly enough is, what I believe is that everyone has things that energize, and everyone has different talents they can bring to this cause. So we have lawyers who volunteer their time to help people like me to sit on the street and know that I've got a free lawyer to support me. We have people who used to work in investment banking who are then quitting that and then managing our finances. And you need people from all walks of life, also people who have different educations, who can build protest signs and paint them and build boats and make all that stuff look really nice, not even necessarily be out there on the streets. So I think everyone needs to reflect on, okay, if this is the issue of our time, this is the issue of our species this century, how can I contribute with my talents, with my privilege or lack of privilege, with the things that energize me? So I think there are definitely multiple approaches, and we need all of them. We need all the help we can get. Key thing though is disruption, or at least supporting someone else to disrupt that, to actually change that game.
Well said. That's a really great way to kind of wrap up this piece, I think. And for anybody out there, carry Tom's disruption, right? Carry it with you. Be radical a little bit in whatever circle of influence you have, and be thoughtful, and do it the way that feels good. But if it's like, if the system is telling you like, no, we can't buy that stapler, be like, yes, we can. Like, help me fix this. Yes, we can. We could buy the damn stapler. Like, come on, right? Like, all right. I like.
We will change the world through better stapler purchases. Yes.
Yes. All right.
Starts with staplers. Hashtag.
Well, it seems like a pretty. Maybe we should talk to Staples about sponsorship here. I'm kidding. All right. Sorry, my dark humor comes out once in a while. Okay. Well, maybe not. I don't know. Anyway, good time to maybe light a fire here as we go. So we're going to take a mindful minute or two here, take a break for a second. We actually go back on Angel's Landing so you can see the view from the top of this epic cliff we're standing on. And then Tom and I are going to perform a couple of pages of his first comic in the VIRIVERSE. So we'll see you in just a couple of minutes.
Thank you for listening to part 1 of our conversation with Tom Marshall, aka the visionary Lemur. To continue listening to our deep dive on civil disobedience and meet a few new changemakers coming into the conversation, see part 2. Our music today was brought to you by Cranky Conductor. Look him up on Spotify and Instagram. And thanks as always to our planet for the sights and sounds of nature. Today we featured Angel's Landing in Zion Canyon National Park, Utah, USA. For those listening to the podcast, check out YouTube to see the nature in a visual form. Thanks once again for hanging out in the VIRIVERSE. If you're an aspiring changemaker who wants to break through the status quo, join our email experience at linktree/viridescence. And if you know of anybody else who would gain value from these conversations, click like, review, share, comment, subscribe, all the things. We love to hear from you and your perspective. It teaches us shit. Later, friends. Signed, your Vera Vigilantes.
Welcome to issue 3 of the Friction comic collection. Don't hate the player, hate the game. The climate decade requires rapid climate action and civil disobedience. There are 3 sustainability lessons in this comic. Number 1, affecting systems change. You'll learn about the difference between protesting and disruption, actually changing the rules of the game. Second lesson is purpose versus financial growth. And the third is be brave, and the acronyms here, impacting beyond just ourselves, being proud to be the crazy ones, creating the world we want to see, and connecting deeply, and enjoying impact and partnership.
Be brave. Oh, the visionary lemur scampers across a bed of hot coals, and through the flame gate. As he looks up, he sees the crayon brush sky through the top of the biodome. He climbs the stairs, and as his wide eyes cross that stage horizon, up, he sees the fire starters waving in eager anticipation. And as he comes off that final step and glides across the stage, he shares his spark with all of us. We are then transported into a whirlwind of inferno. As the humor heats up, he entertains and inspires and teaches us all how to live a meaningful life. Led by our fearless leaders, the fire starters kindle a campfire of conversation and collaboration for change, which we are about to do in just a minute.
Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. Margaret Mead. The fire starters are one of these small groups affecting change. They have their work cut out for them, though. And while a small group can break through the status quo, this doesn't mean we should tear down the status quo players. It is the game we should be disrupting and transforming into a more sustainable system for all. Welcome to a don't hate the player, hate the game philosophy.
We will be releasing the full version of this comic, and we're going to give you a preview through conversation here in just a minute. But if you want access to this, sign up for our email experience, and it will go live next Wednesday. And that is linktree/viridescent with a dot between the TR and the EE. All right, shall we all jump around a campfire and have a conversation? And please, 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 everybody in the audience, come up on stage with us. If you just click the raise hand function, we'll bring you up onto the camera feed and participate in a group conversation with us. And Tom's going to take us through something that's calming. We've had some intensity the last couple of minutes here, so we're going to do kind of a calming ritual to set the stage. Over to you, Tom.
Thank you, Chance. All right, so I'd like to ask all of you just to shake out any tension in your body. Get yourselves comfortable, shake out any tension, maybe shaking your arms a little bit, the legs, just shaking out anything that's within you. It feels a bit uncomfortable. Okay, until you're set in a really nice position, feeling relaxed. Now I'd like you to take a deep breath in through your nose. Hold it. And out through your mouth slowly. Again, in through your nose. Hold. And out through your mouth slowly. And now you can breathe normally. I'd like you to feel into an intention. If you're live with us now, an intention that you have for this conversation that we're about to have. Perhaps a feeling that you want to take in, maybe an action that you want to share, but focus on an intention. And if you're listening to this as a recording, perhaps focus on an intention for a sustainable act that you want to take. The way that you want to feel going forward, having listened to this podcast. So as you focus on this intention, whatever it is, try to feel into a part of your body. Is there a part of your body where you feel this intention coming from? Just gently scan your body and see, is there a part that comes to the front when you think about this intention? Maybe it's your heart, maybe it's your chest, your belly, your neck, or your smile. Wherever it is, just feel into that. And allow that part to build up as you focus on it even more. And now what I'd like you to imagine is that this intention is just coming out of that part of your body in this beam of light. So you imagine this white, bright light beam is coming out from that part of your body, out into the world. Seeing that white light come out from that part of your body, and allow yourself to smile. Smile as you see yourself releasing this intention out into the world, into the universe. Bringing that change, that purpose out if you're listening in the podcast, or feeling that intention go out now if you're live with us. And smile, feel the joy now that you've released that intention to take forward with you. You can take a deep breath in through your nose. As you sigh, just imagine that intention going out into the world. As you breathe out, sending that intention out into the world. And now you can just feel your feet on the ground, contact with your chair if you're sitting down. Hear the sounds around you in your space, and just gently come back to the room, come back to this present moment. And in your own time, you can just gently open your eyes. Thank you all for reflecting on your intention, which will bring us forth in this session and bring you forward in your life, your work as a change maker, a sustainability champion, if you're listening. Now what I'm going to do is I will symbolically light a match. And I will blow this intention out, all of our intentions out into the universe. Beautiful. Thank you, everyone, for contributing to that.
All that peace and calm from the radical revolutionary that is the visionary lemur. How about that? Or we sit by a fire.
Balance, yin and yang.
All right, Tom, where do you want to take us? What do we want to talk about?
I would be interested in our wonderful MCK who's taken the stage. You have listened to us for the last hour or hour and a half even, and I'd be interested in your thoughts on the conversation. Are there certain topics or themes that come out you would maybe like to dig in deeper together, or maybe some questions that you have? Yeah, feel free to share.
Yeah, let's see. Yeah, I can just think through some of the things that kind of came up for me, and then maybe pick one. I mean, I liked from the very beginning, this idea of, freedom to do things in your life that give you meaning. I think that is something that probably is all connecting us, and a really important question to revisit and to think about, even if we might think that we are on that path. Chance, I love that question when you were asking, how do you reach people that don't share your values? And I think, Tom, when you were talking about safety and stability and how that means in a particular context, I thought that was quite powerful for me. I think the names, like everybody has a name, Aurora's the change maker, Tom's the visionary lemur, Carla's the researcher, everybody's kind of got their little things going on. I think that's really interesting in this VIRIVERSE. Oh, Tom, there's one small thing I wanted to clarify with you. When, Aurora was talking about how, it's about owning and naming parts of ourselves, which I thought was a really interesting comment and a more general thing. And then you said either owning the compliment or the confidence that is given to you. Which C word were you using?
So firstly, I really love that, MCK, that you took notes on this conversation, that you were so diligently listening in, and that you found this so valuable that you thought, I'm going to capture some of these things. I really appreciate that, and it shows your attentiveness. And so thank you for that. It gives, shows something of what you believe about this event and what we're saying. So that thank you for that. And in a way, I'm creating a compliment for myself here from you, which is very meta of what we're saying right now. So I am you meant to use the words to actually, but what C word did I use? You said C word in English, that sounds bad, but
I think it's confidence and compliment, right? Somebody's seeing something that they appreciate and enjoy, which is a compliment. And when that happens, it builds your confidence, right? To me, it's
exactly.
They're sort of intertwined.
Definitely. So we live in a system which is predicated on making people feel like they're not enough. Because if you felt like you were enough, why would you work harder? Why would you buy more things? Why would you be striving for more and financial maximization if you felt like you were enough as you were? And so I think because of that system and that such a strong, powerful, disempowering belief, which is so prevalent, we find it very difficult to accept praise on our behalf if someone says that we are enough or gives us a compliment, and we're almost so intuitively used to saying, to downplaying that compliment, right? If someone says, "Oh, your shirt looks nice," it's like, no, it was only $20 from this secondhand thrift store, right? It's like the instant response, like you instantly downplay it. And that's because of those beliefs that we have, and almost to say that you accept that and to say, which is what you should, or what I would advise you to say is thank you. Yes, thank you. That's all you need to say. So I think people should own the compliments given to them, because you're also honoring the other person as well. You're also validating their feelings, and to say no and to push it back is almost invalidating their opinion. So it works both ways.
Mm. Yeah, and I think that's probably also where I was like in my mind, I was like, oh, I think kind of like you were saying, Aurora, oh, I think they are connected. So I wonder where the starting point was, and I know we can weave them together, but yeah, so that's cool. That's yeah, I like that. The other question, what's your biggest piece of advice for a radical revolutionary? Or you kind of said it a little bit differently, but that's kind of how I was processing. I love that part, Chance. And I think that don't hate the player, hate the game. Getting people to think in a more systems kind of a way is really cool. Because I think one thing, and maybe this is for us to maybe a thing to expand on it. Yeah. But, I mean, I do think about that, this idea like, wow, yeah, it really is hard. You think everybody's pointing fingers at each other, or at least away from themselves. We can't do it only by ourselves, only on our own. But yeah, like these systems that I thought this part of the conversation was really interesting, of just like thinking about the systems and you going off and doing your thing with the sandwich board and saying like, hey, I know what's in my rights. I know that everybody else. I mean, I guess a reason why people look at Greta is because she does things out in public. Yeah. Maybe people aren't doing enough out in public. And I think one thing that I was thinking about in this conversation was it's really easy. And this goes back to what you were saying about like the in-person, like one of your 12 values about being in person.
Real connection happens in person. One of my principles. Yeah.
Real connection happens in person. And I've had this kind of like back and forth too, because like I think I've met some people, during the pandemic, that's been really special for me, and really awesome. And I mean, Chance, even that Chance and I had a Chance meeting in a clubhouse room. And, I thought he had a pretty good vibe, and we sort of kept this until I've been able to make it here today, which I'm really grateful for. So there are kind of relationships like that I think have been great. But yeah, it's like we have these people, politicians, other people who are, thought leaders and whatnot, they can just say something and that ultimately ends up affecting our lives in ways, but they will never show up for us. They will never be there for us in person.
What would you like to dive into here? Because I see you're on this thought train, MCK, and I'm enjoying like you being vulnerable and sharing this. So you're talking about the no blaming and shaming thing, which is interesting to dive into. But we've also got here like the connection happens in person thing, and really like being there for each other. So I'm going to pick the no blaming and shaming thing and dive into that, because I think that's interesting to expand upon.
We can talk about connection, right? We can weave
Let's do it.
Yeah, I think that, because I think this is something that many change makers have difficulty with, right? So I've been living in the Netherlands now for 9 years, away from my family who live in the UK. When I was a student, I would always fly back to the UK rather than take the Eurostar train, which goes through Paris and is about 5% of the emissions of a flight. Don't quote me on that figure, it's something around that. Why did I do that? Well, because the train is 3 times the price of a flight ticket, and I was a student with relatively little money, right? But nowadays I have the privilege to be able to buy that train ticket, whereas I didn't before, and save on carbon and live more according to my values. So one of the Extinction Rebellion principles is no blaming and shaming, right? Because what you see is that if you would try to be the ultimate person, ultimate vegan, environmentalist who would live by all your principles, you would go out and live in the nature and farm your own food and would never be able to get in a car or go anywhere outside of your little village. That would be the ultimate low carbon lifestyle, but that's just completely unrealistic in this system that we live in right now. And you see activists like Greta Thunberg who make a point by taking the boat famously from Europe to New York. I think a couple of years ago she did that to try not to fly, to avoid that But her team, of course, all flew over, right? Which you don't say. So I think this is a key thing. We need to stop blaming and shaming and beating people up, because we're all living within that system. You know, if for the last 30 years we'd really had R&D going into hydrogen planes, maybe I would still be able to fly to the UK on even cheaper emissions than the train. So I think that's something that's super important. We need to stop pointing fingers for not being vegan or taking the plane, particularly for people who are ordinary citizens who don't have the power and the money of political leaders or business leaders.
So, something I'd offer in here too, I just attended a conference in San Diego called Sustainable Brands, and very much about this weird intersection and this kind of gray area that these people operate in there. They're very much entrepreneurs, right? They're working inside mega corporations and they're trying to figure out how to flip this so that we are disrupting the status quo, but also playing nice with stakeholders and all that. It is not an enviable position to be in. It's really difficult. It's admirable, but it's really hard. One of the things I heard in there that I just absolutely loved is I attended a session on the idea of regenerative leadership. And it was talking about how, this idea of regeneration is becoming a really important kind of trigger trendy, catchphrasey sort of word in sustainability. So let's break it down so it's a little bit more understandable. Really all it is a mindset and an approach to help heal, rebuild, rebalance, recenter. So very much in the environmental side, it's about planet, right? Letting the planet heal itself, doing things as humans to kind of set up the planet to be successful, right? But when it comes to people and regenerative leadership, I think one of the best things that we can do is we can figure out and learn how to work with as many people as we can, right? And reach as many people as we can. And I think that one of the reasons why we have not gotten far enough along in the development or redevelopment of a more sustainable world is because it started in a kind of radical revolutionary sort of approach, and that affected great change. I mean, just the Beatles alone brought an entirely new wave of energy. Marvin Gaye is another one that was huge during the Vietnam War and gave a voice to rising up to meet these challenges. Muhammad Ali, all these things, those things are necessary. And that provided a huge wave and spark of change, but we didn't keep the fire burning. We didn't keep it lit. We didn't keep it moving forward. And then we came into the kind of 90s into like 2000, and we started to have this messaging around climate change. And it was driven by climate scientists, which can be hard for people to understand or relate to because they're very highly educated and they're thinking on the biggest levels and how the earth works and all that. But two, it was also led by a politician in Al Gore, right, with an inconvenient truth. And those things, it all became political and it all got wrapped up. And you had the status quo, certainly those in power on other spaces, casting doubt on the science to protect interests in fossil fuels and all those things, right? I think we missed something. I think we missed this piece of trying to meet people where they are and offer them the ability to participate. And then you create this regenerating sort of cyclical sort of system that can work. And so I love this idea of like kind of not blaming and shaming this and that, whatever. But I went up and I asked a question to the woman that presented this session at Sustainable Brands. And I asked her, I said, how can we make this type of philosophical high-level thinking sort of approachable for people that might not understand it from either an education standpoint, or they're highly educated, they might understand it, but they don't want to. How do we reach them? And her and I talked back and forth a little bit, and where we landed was this very simple thing. I say a whole lot of nonsense, and then I'm going to boil it down to one sentence, boom, bang. Tom knows it well, and I can see the look on his face. He knows it. Just say it at the beginning, you dumbass, right? No. Context. I love context. No. And I'm still doing it. All right, here we go. So one sentence. Don't be afraid to knock people over, but catch them before they fall, or let them fall and then pick them back up, right? Don't be afraid to make people uncomfortable, but have their back when they get weird and they probably not be nice to you, but be nice to them.
Yeah, well, thank you, Chance. Brings me to a couple of things. One is that progress doesn't happen without conflict, and that's just a rule of progress and change in society.
Nature's the same way.
Yeah. I think one thing it triggers me to think about is the grieving process that I believe everyone needs to go through to truly understand the magnitude of this climate and ecological crisis, which is that I think many people, they may have read reports about the climate crisis. They watch the news, they know about the climate crisis, they've heard about it. But there's a big difference between like knowing about it and internalizing it and feeling it. And internalizing, what does this actually mean for my future? Okay, so maybe my children will suffer. Maybe my children will go hungry. Maybe there'll be shortages in the food supply. Maybe the country where I live in will be underwater in 50, 60 years time here in the Netherlands, right? And I think many people are not at that stage yet. And it feels very almost saddening for me when I give these talks about the climate and ecological crisis to have to like start this grieving process for many people, to help them take that red pill and realize, okay, this is what is happening. This is the consequences. And I think many people, they think they understand it, but I believe that if you've not really been through that grieving process, if you haven't, I think people approach this in different ways, but I think most people, you need to cry about this. You need to feel anxious about this, which is really sad to do. And if you haven't felt that, you probably don't really get it. You probably don't really get what's happening and how it's going to affect your life and your children's life, in my opinion. And so I think in that way you're creating conflict and your people are falling over. But once they've done that, you got to pick them back up. As you said, Chance, you got to show them this is happening, but we can actually make changes. We can find meaning in the suffering, and we can actually come together and do something about this. And this is what we're going to do.
Can I interject something into the conversation that we haven't really addressed? And that's the word justice in all of this. Because when we talk about the systems and needing to tear apart the systems and rebuild them, it makes me think of a conversation I had right after that climate report came out. It's been maybe 6-8 weeks ago or so. And I was on something like this, kind of a meetup, casual conversation thing. And there was someone who was really intense about it. And I was thinking, it came to mind because you were talking about like this grieving process and people internalizing it. And some people who've really internalized it, like they took to social media and they're just and I respect wherever people are in that sort of space and that journey. And I love the use of grief as a framework for us to think about how we're going to process and move through this. It's a one type of theory of change, right? So this person was talking about, we must change immediately. And her sort of system answer was at least in the events space, because this was an sustainable events discussion, was to require all vendors to do a scope 3 analysis. If you're not familiar with the scope 3 analysis, it's looking at all of the carbon emissions in your supply chain. And I was like, whoa, because I'm working on this initiative to try to really drive procurement with small to medium businesses, particularly those that are disadvantaged, being women, BIPOC, other groups that tend to have a lot of barriers and a lot of challenges starting and growing businesses. You can't, they don't even know what scope 3 means. Like sophisticated global corporations aren't even doing full scope 3 analysis. So what are you even talking about? So I think we have to really be careful when we're talking about systems. We're talking about the luxury of even grieving and thinking about these things, right? That when we include the justice part of climate justice, you're opening up an entire world of what about all those people who forget your children and the country they're going to live in 20 years. These people are living it now. They're climate, migrants and climate refugees today. And I think that, we have to, at the same time that we're trying to think about how we're going to shift the systems for the future, like how do we offer immediate relief? Like those people, like we like how do we catch them before they fall? How do we reach them? So I'm just wondering, Tom, in your work, like how maybe you've encountered the climate refugee aspect, how you've adjusted. Obviously you're a proponent of justice. I can just feel that from the vibe of who you are as a human, but just wondering if you have some more specific activities or thoughts around that piece of it.
Yeah, so super important points that you mentioned. Of course, I talk about it in the future. How are you going to deal with this? But it's the crisis is now. People are suffering now. People are dying now all over the world. And yeah, I mean, so the second demand of Extinction Rebellion is to be net zero by 2025 in a just and fair manner. And just and fair manner part, okay, how do we do something that's done in a fair way, right? And, you look at the policies that are coming out of COP now, where there's going to be billions of dollars given to the global south to help manage that transition. And that's good progress, and that's important things to be done. But if you look more about how, as Extinction Rebellion, how do we envision this justice part like practically happening, is we have our third demand, which is really defining how are we going to get to net zero by 2025, because that seems ridiculous. It seems impossible to net zero 2025 worldwide. How would you do that? And the way that we see that is to have a citizens assembly in each country around the world. So what a citizens assembly is you take a representative sample of a population. So let's imagine that you have 100 people in this assembly. So you maybe have 51 women, 49 men, people of all different backgrounds, different education levels, different occupations, all different parts of the US, if we make it US, right? And then they meet for a series of weekends over a certain period of time, and they are informed by different stakeholders and experts and scientists, which would include workers who work at fossil fuel companies, right? Even maybe one or two climate change deniers, if you have those folks, but they're informed by all the different stakeholders, all the different people there, and it's a facilitated debate. So rather than a Twitter spat that happens, it's really like you have proper facilitators coming in, facilitating a critical thinking, critical dialogue to basically define how we're going to reach net zero by 2025. And they're given a mandate by the government to say, if a certain amount of your proposals pass a certain percentage, we will implement them. So it's not through Congress, not through Parliament, not through the Senate, just implemented. And it's given that mandate, which is super important. So they have these discussions, they come up with proposals, and then they vote on those proposals about what to do. And this assembly has been used in other social justice issues like abortion. It was done in Ireland about 5 years ago or so. And what you found was actually that the citizens were far more progressive or radical than Parliament expected they would be, because they were actually informed about the issue. So they could see past their own biases, which in Ireland is a very religious country, was often based around those sorts of beliefs. And they could see past that, and they actually could think critically and discuss with each other. And you've had citizens' assemblies on the climate in France most recently, but they have not been given a fair mandate, because the proposals were still going to be decided by the president whether to implement them or not. So France came up with some very, I think, pretty decent proposals, pretty reasonable proposals, like banning all advertisements from fossil fuel companies, just banning all of them, right? Or limiting the speed on the highway, because if you limit it to a certain amount, then you greatly reduce CO2. So pretty reasonable proposals, but only 10% of the proposals were actually implemented, because fundamentally, those in power would be less needed if we would accept that citizens are well informed and in a facilitated environment can make good decisions. So it's also an ego thing to not trust citizens. So that's why they don't do that, I think. So we have to disrupt the system and force them to let citizens decide. And the advantage of this system is, of course, you get past the corporate lobby, you get past the one centrist senator of the Democrats who's holding back Biden's entire agenda for the entire country and the entire planet, right? And you get past this sort of 4-year or 5-year electoral cycle, right? Where you can't think long term because we've got to get elected. Even 2-year cycle of the midterm system that you have in the States, right? And so that's like how I see justice being reached, because you've actually got people from different minorities at the table, having that dialogue. And you can imagine, you know, all of this coming together afterwards of all the different countries with their assemblies, all with kind of similar mandates, ultimately bringing the targets that we need, the measures that we need to get to net zero, to limit warming to 1.5 degrees, to prevent the catastrophe that net zero 2050 would give us, according to science. So that's long answer to the justice issue. So if you want to learn more, Google systems assemblies, research that. But for me, systems assembly is the closest we've got to a silver bullet to address this crisis.
MCK, what do you have on this? Any thoughts that this has triggered?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really cool idea. And I mean, I think the question that I was thinking about, and I mean, it kind of goes back to, you know, the question that we were talking earlier about, you know, how do you get others to, you know, to see this other side, or how do you get others to change, or, you know, to be a part? I think the like extended version of that question in this case is maybe, Tom, you're suggesting that people, you know, haven't been able to get in touch with that emotional side of what might actually happen. What is the difference between someone who has felt that emotionally and the person who still is yet to feel that emotionally?
It's a great question. So firstly, why do people not feel it emotionally, right? You know, there's many smart people who have read the science, who have read the reports, and why don't we feel that? Well, it's just how we're wired as humans. We're wired to avoid pain and seek pleasure, and keep our head in the sand. And that's largely why I think we have not made progress on reducing CO2 emissions over the last 30 years, right? Because we avoid that. We don't want to feel that. It's painful to feel that. So why would we? We're not wired that way. And this is why you need a paternalistic state to come on the TV, come on the radio and say, we're in the middle of the largest crisis that our species has ever faced. And this is the reality. This is what's going to happen. This is what we're going to do. And that's, in a way, what happened with the pandemic, right? You had governments come up and basically overnight countries shut down. We said, we're really sorry. This is the truth. This is the reality. This is what we need to do. And that's real leadership. And basically the adults, the leaders in the world, as Greta said, they're not mature enough to say it as it is. That would take real leadership to tell people how bad things were, and they're not doing that because of the system that we're in, because of this 5-year electoral cycle that I mentioned earlier. And so the difference between someone who's faced up to that and not, I mean, for me, it was a bit of a coincidence that I was, you know, able to find out about Extinction Rebellion just because I'm from the UK and attend one of their talks. And Extinction Rebellion started in the UK, so they're very big there. And so I heard about that, was able to attend one of their talks, which was delivered very, very well by an experienced speaker. So I could really feel it at an emotional level, and was asked to reflect about, okay, what did that mean for my future? And also around kind of open-mindedness, I guess, to allow yourself to feel certain emotions and certain vulnerability that it takes to kind of run into the fire and feel that. And that takes a bit, you know, certain privilege of to be vulnerable, to have security, to have stability in your life. It's a bit like if you're in a very insecure environment, you wouldn't want to look into this. You would be even less likely to do that. It's like as a child, right? You don't even really question the competence of your parents, or at least I didn't, and I held them up as perfect human beings, which they're not. Because to question that as a child, as a 10-year-old boy, to question that your dad is maybe wrong about some things would mean that you are at the mercy of a human being who's imperfect, and things are uncertain and unsafe, which you're not wired to do. So it also takes, again, a certain amount of privilege, like as I have, to be in a stable life where everything's going right for me, really, to be in a position where I can be vulnerable and can accept and feel that pain.
So Tom, I'd love to jump in and offer a point of my own on this kind of point, and then pivot us to, we have a surprise for MCK for joining us up on stage. Actually, we're going to take you through a little immersive sustainability. So I'm just going to tease that, and Tom knows I like a good tease. But before I do, in hearing and listening, I love your comment in the chat, Aurora. When science and facts don't align with deep-seated beliefs and values, rather than a journey of exploration and understanding the way we all have, as I assume, most people shut out what doesn't fit. So I want to offer a kind of weaving upward and climb from this idea of Tom's call to action as an individual that is safe and secure, and using that, wield that, do something with that, do something. I want to climb the stair up to the top of these big companies. And I want to do it in the framing of what sustainability actually means, because I think that we've done a poor job as a sustainability movement too, though. We're trying to be a bridge between opposing views and different things. Sustainability is not about costing people their jobs. It is not about a company losing money to a point where it doesn't have the ability to operate anymore. What we want from you big companies and the incredibly intelligent, innovative, smart, great leaders that are at the top of these companies, use your power, your resources, do something. This weaves back to our conversation earlier with Aurora and the Scope 3 emissions, that requiring all vendors to have Scope 3 analysis not being super fair or accessible for people at the so-called bottom of our capitalistic mountain here. Let's turn this into a cycle where you, as part of the cycle, maybe the one that's spinning the strongest, you have the power, you have the resources, set the model, fix this, do something. You have everything at your capability, and you have people in your organization that would absolutely love and be inspired to help you figure this out. Go to somebody that you know has a passion for even just a tiny piece of this and say, hey, can you figure out what the hell scope carbon emissions are and how we are going to do anything, build anything? Don't tell us you can't. And don't accuse us of wanting to take away people's jobs. We want to promote, evolve, and mature people's growth along the way. And who knows, maybe you'll pick up a few new people along the way too. That doesn't mean pushing people over the mountain. It's a cycle that is spinning and regenerating itself. Do something, please, and thank you. Okay.
Wow, that is so well said, Chance.
That's my rant for today. I feel like I needed to get that out because it was bubbling. I felt it was flickering in this fire here, and I had to pour some more sustainable fuel than gasoline on the fire. Okay. MCK, we would like to take you through an exercise to help you build and meet your sustainability alter ego character. Are you down? Are you game for this? It's not too scary, I promise. Yeah, all right. So you mentioned something about, right, I am the designer, and Aurora is the change maker. Tom is the visionary lemur. He doesn't have it probably on his Zoom account, but you've seen it. Yeah, there's Tom Marshall. That's the visionary lemur right there. You got those wide eyes right there with the glasses. Yes, sir. All right. So I'm going to let Aurora guide this, and Tom too. They're going to kind of facilitate the conversation, ask you 3 questions. And as you do that, I'm going to do some designing and kind of wield my alter ego. And then we'll have something for you to look at here in a few minutes. So
Chance, do you have a preference of where I start, or you want me to just...
Yeah, animal, nature, element.
Okay, that's what I thought, but I didn't know if you wanted me to surprise you and just change it up. Okay, so MCK, first of all, can I just get like maybe a because this could help with the context. I know it certainly did with the way Chance designed my alter ego and Tom's. Can you give us a couple of minutes of like, kind of, who are you? What do you do? Where do you live? I've never met you before. So just maybe just a little bit of that piece of it.
Yeah, sure. I grew up in a magical place called Guilderland, New York. It's in upstate New York, and it's close to Albany, which is the capital. I spent most of my adult life living in China. I was living in Beijing, a big city, but I also spent some time in a small village in Yunnan province, which is kind of like, so China and America, they're kind of about the same size. It's like the Arizona of China. It's in the southwest, but an incredible place that has amazing environmental diversity as well as people diversity.
MCK, can I just say, this is crazy. This is a crazy small world connection. A social entrepreneur that I've been mentoring for 5 years. She's an American who lives in Yunnan province. She is a beekeeper, and she's married to a Tibetan man and lives there. And she works with rural village farmers to help teach them to raise honeybees. And I've never been there to visit, but that's my dream, is to visit her in her element over there. So I think that's just crazy. When you said Yunnan province and you're describing it, I'm like, I know exactly where that is, at least on a map. So that's.
Does she live in Shangri-La or Zhongdian?
Huh?
Does she live in Shangri-La or Zhongdian?
The second one, I think, because I don't know. The words are a little bit challenging sometimes to pronounce. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, very cool. I may have heard about her only because a friend of mine went north at one point and met a foreigner who was a beekeeper.
Yep. And she's blonde with blue eyes, and she stands out in Western China for sure.
Yeah, so not too many of those folks hanging out beekeeping up there. So yeah, that's very cool. Yunnan is this, because the top is kind of like the Tibetan plateau and the bottom is kind of like Southeast Asia. So it was really, really magical. Different kind of magic than Guilderland, New York. But yeah, it was pretty cool to spend time there and be there. So yeah, I love things that are really important to me is communication, connection, helping people to improve their relationships, helping people to their relationships with others as well as with themselves. I like bringing people together for unique experiences, that getting them thinking a little bit differently or interacting a little bit differently. What else?
And
I love bright
official profession
colors.
What's your official profession?
My profession is around communication, so helping entrepreneurs to improve communication with others and with themselves.
Awesome. So, well, then let's jump into some of these elements for your alter ego. Wow, that sometimes trips off the tongue, doesn't it? What is your favorite animal, or what's your spirit animal? What do you identify with?
That's a good question. What is my spirit animal? I don't know.
Are there animals that you just like? That you just find, this is a cool animal?
You're super into it. They look cool. They're fun. Anything, right? Don't put too much pressure. No, don't pressure here.
So I'm looking at a squirrel outside, and I'm just thinking of, the nature of my personality. Sometimes, that funny joke when you're kind of like going off onto a tangent, or you're like, somebody talks about something, you're like, whoa, squirrel. So why don't we choose squirrel as my spirit animal?
I love it.
Squirrel.
Shiny object syndrome a little bit, right?
I think many of us fall victim to that sometimes. So this is a fun joke to take forward, I think.
I love it. All right. What about nature? What is your favorite nature element?
And it has to be one of the five, like fire,
No, no,
water,
no. So it
wood,
could be
or
anything, right? It could be a particular flower, trees, the sky, wind, yeah, anything truly. Any sort of like little
Anything
element. It could be a blade of
outside.
grass.
Yep.
Yeah, a blade of grass, even anything. Yep.
uh, um, mushrooms.
Tell us more about that.
Many reasons. The ones that I guess, so, I saw this documentary recently, Fantastic Fungi. You may
Oh,
have
isn't
seen
that
it.
great?
So I was thinking between like trees and mushrooms, because I think both of these, have these really incredible things about them. And I think the one thing, about Fantastic Fungi for me was that you can't really eat a tree. But trees are these incredible things. They're all different shapes and sizes. They're all different species. They're all of these kinds of things. And I think that's where mushrooms takes to the next level. It's like mushrooms are all of that incredible diverse range of species. They grow everywhere at any, place and time, and they're both they're meant to heal and to help and to like do all these like beautiful things. So I think mushrooms is this like awesome thing. It's like you eat them in their regular states, you eat them in their other states. Some of them you don't want to touch because it's really not a good idea to have those. So there's like a little bit of that danger element, or it's like it's not a perfect thing. There's other things too, but the poisonous
Like
element
fire,
also plays
right?
its role.
Fire is a beautiful thing, but you can't touch it, right?
Yep. So yeah, I think mushrooms is my favorite natural element, and
That's awesome. I love it. So what about your sustainability beacon, sort of the North Star, the thing that keeps you centered and focused and inspired and moving forward?
uh, and so just like can we talk a little bit more about that, or like how to think about going
Yeah,
about
Well,
choosing one of
actually,
yeah,
those?
go ahead, Aurora.
let's
Yeah,
give
go
some
ahead.
examples. I was going to say, Tom, you talk again about what you would say your sustainability beacon is.
Yeah. So about what's a beacon is? A beacon for me is something that guides me on my journey. It's part of my philosophy as a sustainability champion. So for me, it's about doing the right thing regardless of the outcome. That's what Václav Havel is about. And Margaret Mead, it's really about the power of community and doing things together. So doing things together and doing things because they're right. So what's part of your kind of philosophy that guides you in the way that you want to make change and be a sustainability champion?
And to
And for
offer
me,
to,
mine was, as
yeah,
I
go
don't
ahead, Aurora.
know if you were on the call earlier, but mine is basically the fact that it was the connection with the spiritual side, that I was able to actually have congruency in my life with this talent and love I have for business, but also this spiritual part of me that felt like I was supposed to go and do this other thing, but all these gifts really kind of come together. So that was mine. So it's really a very broad question. It's whatever you want it to be, as most of these things are, but hopefully that helps give you a little bit of sort of guidance on that.
Yeah, that's cool. So I think, when I think of kind of my superpower, I think about it as being present. I also think that's something that I wish other people could be. And I think it goes back to what we're talking about. If we were to actually listen to people and kind of like what's going on with them and what they're thinking about and what's, happening with them, then that would give us a great opportunity to be able to make that change or to come together and to do things better together. So presence, one conversation at a time.
There's this beautiful balance with what you're saying, because you're allowing yourself the freedom to be squirrel, but also like I'm here, I'm present, you know what I mean? Like it's like, and that aren't most of us some sort of duality, some sort of thing, or we're like, how is it I am this and this? Like, does this confuse anybody else, the fact that I'm this and this in the same person, right? I think that's a beautiful thing about what you just described.
That's hilarious. The present squirrel.
That's it. present world.
And that concludes our conversation with Tom Marshall, also known as the Visionary Lemur, a life coach and, of course, world-saving activist for Extinction Rebellion. An immense thank you to this VIRIVERSE changemaker for his work to make the world a bit better place. Our music today was brought to you by some random shit from Envato. This is a great tool to get digital media assets to make your silly visions into reality. And thanks, as always, to Our Planet for the sights and sounds of nature. Today we featured Angel's Landing from Zion Canyon National Park, Utah, USA, and Water Canyon in the Canaan Wilderness, Utah, USA. For those listening to the podcast, check out our YouTube channel to see the nature in a visual medium. And thanks for listening to the VIRIVERSE events and podcast experience. If you're an aspiring changemaker who wants to break through the status quo, join our email experience at linktree/viridescent. And of course, if you know anybody else that could use this inspiration and learning lesson, share it, subscribe, like, review, comment, all the things. We love to hear from you and your perspective. It teaches us shit. And lastly, Peter Friends. Signed, your Vira Vigilantes.